I was halfway through backing out of the driveway when Caleb knocked on the car window. I rolled it down. He was still in his pajamas, barefoot on the concrete, squinting against the morning sun. I told him to go back inside, that I was already running behind. He said, "Is Mom's friend coming today?" I put the car in park. "What friend, bud?" He shrugged. "The tall one. His truck was here yesterday when I got home from school. Mom said he was helping with something, but then she said, 'Don't tell you because—'" He paused, trying to remember the exact words the way kids do when they're repeating something an adult told them. "Because you'd make it a big deal." He turned around and went back inside. I sat in the driveway for a moment with the engine running. Then I pulled out and went to work. But I thought about that sentence the entire shift. Because you'd make it a big deal. My name is Ethan, 34. Postal carrier out of Tucson, Arizona, 8 years on the job, same routes long enough that the neighborhood dogs don't bark at me anymore. I have a son named Caleb, who just turned 6, and a wife named Renata, who I had been with for 9 years at the time this happened. I want to say up front, I was not a suspicious husband. I didn't check phones, didn't ask where she'd been, didn't have a running list of things that didn't add up. That was never my nature, and honestly, it was never my marriage either. We were steady, comfortable, the kind of couple that doesn't have explosive fights, but also doesn't have a lot of depth to the conversations anymore either. I thought that was just what long-term looked like. I was working with incomplete information. If you're watching this right now, drop your location in the comments. I want to know where this is landing tonight. And if something in the first minute already felt familiar, say it below. Subscribe if you haven't. I'm telling this in parts. When I got home that evening, Caleb was in the bath and Renata was folding laundry on the bed. I leaned against the doorframe and watched her for a second before she noticed me. "Hey," she said. "Rough day?" "No. Normal day." I paused. "Caleb said something to me this morning." Her hands kept moving. "What did he say?" "Said you had a friend over yesterday while I was at work." She looked up, not panicked, something more controlled than that. The look of someone deciding in real time how much to give you. "Yeah, just someone helping me look at the water pressure issue in the guest bathroom. I mentioned it to you last month." I nodded slowly. "You did." She went back to folding. "Caleb's been chatty lately. He said you told him not to mention it to me." A half second, maybe less. I said, "Don't bother you with it at work. You always say not to call you over house stuff when you're on the route." That was true. I had said that. She smiled and tossed a folded shirt into the basket. The conversation was over as far as she was concerned. I said okay and went to change out of my uniform. And here's the thing. Every single thing she said was reasonable, plausible. The water pressure thing was real. I had said not to call me at work over house issues, but the word Caleb had used was not mention it to you at work. The word Caleb had used was make it a big deal. And that's a different thing entirely. That's not a logistics instruction. That's a characterization. That's your wife telling your 6-year-old son how his father is likely to react, before his father even knows there's something to react to. I stood in the bedroom closet thinking about the difference between those two things for longer than I probably should have. 3 days later, I had a short route, finished before 2. Turned onto our street just after 1:45, and there was a black truck parked 2 houses down, engine off, facing the wrong direction for that side of the road. I pulled into my driveway, sat in the car with the AC running. Then I went inside. Renata was in the kitchen. Back to the door. She turned when she heard me, and for just a fraction of a second, not long, barely anything, her face did something it corrected almost immediately. "You're early," she said. "Light load." She turned back to the counter. "Caleb's still at school for another hour." I walked down the hallway toward the bedroom. Past the guest bathroom, the door was slightly open. I pushed it the rest of the way. Nothing. Empty. I stood there anyway, looked at the sink, the fixtures, the water pressure valve on the side wall. Nothing looked touched. Nothing looked recently inspected. The cabinet under the sink had a thin layer of dust along the bottom edge that would not have survived someone crouching down to look at pipes. I closed the bathroom door quietly, walked back to the kitchen, and I started paying attention in a way I hadn't let myself before. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I want to be honest about why. And it wasn't weakness, at least I don't think it was. It was something closer to needing to be sure. Because if I was wrong, I couldn't unsay it. And if I was right, I wanted to walk into that conversation holding something more than a dusty cabinet and a parked truck. So I watched, quietly. The way you do when you're hoping to be proven wrong. The security camera was my idea originally. We got it 2 years ago after a package was stolen off the porch. Cheap system, nothing fancy. One camera facing the driveway, one covering the front door. The footage saves to an app on my phone and loops every 72 hours unless you manually save a clip. I opened the app on a Thursday night while Renata was putting Caleb to bed. The previous 48 hours of footage were gone. Not glitched, not corrupted, manually deleted. The app shows a cleared log the same way a text thread shows when messages have been removed. Somebody had gone in and wiped it. I sat with that for a long time. Renata was the only other person with access to the app. I'd set it up on her phone the same week we installed the cameras. She'd never shown any interest in it before. Had asked me once how to check the footage when she thought she'd left her keys outside, but that was over a year ago. I didn't bring it up. I just noted it and kept moving. The following Tuesday I called in a personal day. First one I'd taken in almost 14 months. I didn't tell Renata. I left the house at my normal time, in uniform, drove to the end of the block, and parked facing our street. I sat there for 2 hours and 40 minutes. Nothing happened. No black truck, no visitors. Just our house sitting quiet in the morning heat the way it always did. I drove to a diner a few miles out and sat in a booth and drank bad coffee and felt genuinely stupid. The particular embarrassment of a man who has worked himself into suspicion over a dusty sink cabinet and a parked truck that could have belonged to anyone. I almost talked myself completely out of it that morning. Almost. I want to tell you about our neighbor Gail. Gail is in her mid-60s, lives directly across the street, and has the unobstructed sight lines and the available time that retired people in single-story houses tend to accumulate. She and Renata were friendly. Casual waves, occasional driveway conversations, that kind of proximity-based neighborliness. About a week after the camera footage incident, I was checking the mail, and Gail was watering her front plants. She waved. I waved back, started to head inside. She said, "Everything okay over there? With the plumbing or whatever?" I stopped, turned around. "Plumbing." She looked mildly uncertain, like she was recalibrating. I've seen a truck over there a few times. Assumed you were having some work done." She said it carefully. The way people say things when they're not sure how much the other person knows. "Yeah," I said. "Just some stuff we're getting looked at." She nodded, went back to her plants. I went inside. So Gail had seen it, more than once clearly, and the way she asked, "Everything okay over there?" was not the voice of someone asking about pipe fittings. That night, after Caleb was asleep, I sat across from Renata at the kitchen table. No setup, no rehearsed line. I just asked her plainly, "Who's been coming over during the day?" She looked at me steadily. "What do you mean?" "The truck." Gail's noticed it. Caleb's mentioned it more than once. The camera footage from last week is gone. I kept my voice level. "I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm asking you directly." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "I deleted the footage because Caleb was playing in the driveway without shoes and I didn't want you to see it and spiral about him getting hurt." A specific answer. Immediate. Detailed. "And the truck?" "I told you, someone looking at the water pressure." "More than once? It's an ongoing thing, Ethan. It's not a simple fix." I nodded, looked at the table. "Okay." She reached over and touched my hand briefly. "You doing all right? You seem stressed." I told her I was fine. I went to bed. And I lay there thinking about the fact that she had a detailed answer ready for the camera footage before I even mentioned the camera footage was what I was referring to. I had said the footage was gone. I hadn't said I thought she deleted it. She told me why she deleted it anyway. I didn't sleep well for the next several days. Not dramatically. I wasn't staring at the ceiling every night or falling apart at work. It was more like a low-grade disturbance, the kind of tired that isn't about sleep hours but about the weight of something you're carrying without being able to set it down anywhere. I kept returning to that moment at the kitchen table. The footage answer. The way it came out fully formed before I'd even framed the question that way. People who are telling the truth don't usually do that. They react to what you actually said. They ask clarifying questions. They get mildly frustrated at the implication. They don't hand you the specific explanation for the specific detail you hadn't named yet. I called my older brother Marcus on a Friday afternoon from my car in a post office parking lot. Marcus is 41, lives in Phoenix, knows me better than most people do. I didn't tell him everything. I laid out the basic shape of it. The truck, Caleb's words, the camera, the table conversation. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "What do you want to be true?" I told him I wanted to be wrong. He said, "That's not the same as what you actually think." He was right. I knew what I actually thought. I just hadn't let myself say it in a complete sentence yet. The following Monday, I came home at my normal time, and Caleb ran to the door the way he usually does. I picked him up, asked about his day, the usual routine. We were on the couch watching cartoons when he said, without any prompting at all, "Mom's friend wasn't here today." I kept my eyes on the TV. "Yeah? She said he's not coming anymore for a while." I looked at him then. "She said that today?" He nodded, completely unbothered, already half watching the cartoon again. I put him down gently and went to find Renata. She was in the bedroom folding clothes, same as that first evening, same posture, same calm. I stood in the doorway. "Did you tell Caleb that your friend wasn't coming around anymore?" She turned around. Something moved across her face. Fast, controlled, gone. "I don't know why he'd say that. He just told me. His words, Mom said he's not coming for a while." She sighed in that particular way that reframes a conversation as exhaustion rather than deflection. "Ethan, I think you're reading into a 6-year-old's rambling. He's pretty specific when he repeats things you've told him. You know that." She turned back to the folding. "I don't know what to tell you." That was it. That was all I got. I walked back out, sat with Caleb, watched the cartoon, but something had shifted. Because she hadn't stopped to think about what he could have meant or where he heard it. She didn't say, "What exactly did he say?" She went straight to dismissing it, which meant she already knew exactly what he was referring to. I want to tell you about the following Thursday. I had a normal route, normal day. Got home at my usual time. Renata said she was going to the grocery store and asked if I needed anything. I said no. She left. Caleb and I were playing in the backyard when he got quiet in that particular way, looking at something, working it out. Then he said, "Daddy, is it bad to keep secrets?" I sat down on the porch step. "Depends on the secret, bud. Why?" He picked at the grass for a moment. "Mom said if I told you about the man it would make you sad. And I don't want to make you sad." Something tightened in my chest. I kept my voice easy. "You're not going to make me sad. You can always tell me things." He was quiet again. Then, "He gave me a juice box once. The man, he was nice." "When was this?" "When I got home from school one time. He was in the kitchen with Mom." He paused. "Mom got scared when she saw me, like when I walk in when she's watching a scary show." I looked at my son sitting cross-legged in the grass, pulling at blades with no concept of what he was giving me. "Okay, bud," I said. "Thank you for telling me." He looked relieved, genuinely relieved, the way children look when they've been carrying something that wasn't theirs to carry. We went back to playing, but I sat there thinking about a man in my kitchen, in my house, giving my son a juice box, and my wife's face going frightened when Caleb walked in. Not embarrassed, not surprised, frightened. That night, after Caleb was in bed, I told Renata I needed her to sit down. She did. I sat across from her, and I kept my voice quiet and completely level. "I need you to tell me the truth about who's been in this house." She looked at me for a long moment. I watched her decide something. "He's a friend," she said. "Someone I've known for a while. It's not what you're thinking." "What am I thinking?" She looked away. "Ethan." "Say it," I said. "If it's not what I'm thinking, then say what it actually is." She didn't say anything for a long time, and that silence, not dramatic, not tearful, just still, told me everything I had spent weeks trying not to know. I stood up, poured a glass of water, and stood at the sink, and drank it slowly, while the refrigerator hummed, and the house settled, and my son slept down the hall, completely unaware of what had just shifted permanently in the room 20 feet from his bedroom door. I didn't yell, didn't break anything, didn't say another word that night. I just stood there at that sink and let the full weight of it land. Not the anger, not yet, but the grief. The specific grief of realizing the thing you were hoping to be wrong about has been quietly true for longer than you want to calculate. I rinsed my glass, set it on the counter, went to the couch, lay down. That was the last night I slept in my own bedroom for a while. I want to be honest about the days that followed, not to make myself look good, but because I think the honest version is more useful than the version where I handled everything cleanly. I didn't handle it cleanly. I slept on the couch for 4 nights. Renata didn't push me to come back to the bedroom, and I didn't offer. We moved around each other in the house like 2 people in a waiting room. Present, aware of each other, not talking about why we were both there. Caleb noticed. Kids always notice. He started being quieter at dinner, watching us the way he'd watch a cartoon he didn't fully understand yet. I made a point to be normal with him, laughed at his jokes, helped with his homework, did the bedtime routine the same as always. Whatever was breaking between me and Renata was not going to land on him, if I could help it. On the 5th day she came and sat beside me on the couch. Caleb was in bed. The TV was on, but I wasn't watching it. She said his name. The man. Said they had known each other before she and I got together, reconnected about 7 months ago. Said it had started as just talking and then became something she couldn't explain simply. I listened. I didn't interrupt. When she finished, I asked one question. Did you want out of this marriage before he came back around? Or did he become the reason you wanted out? She took a long time with that. She said she didn't know. I nodded, turned back to the TV. She went to bed. I sat there for another hour thinking about the fact that I don't know was actually the most honest thing she had said to me in months. And I didn't know whether that made it better or worse. I called Marcus the next morning, told him the full version this time. No gaps, no softening. He listened without saying much. When I finished, he asked if I needed him to come down. I told him no. Then I sat with that for a second and changed my answer. He drove down from Phoenix that Saturday. We sat in my backyard while Renata took Caleb to her sister's for the afternoon. We didn't talk about solutions or next steps or what I should do. We just sat there, drank beer, watched the neighbor's cat move along the fence line. At some point he said, "You know what the actual hard part is going to be?" I said I knew. He meant Caleb. I want to talk about that for a moment because I think it's the part people skip over in stories like this. Everyone focuses on the marriage, the betrayal, the confrontation, the decision. But the part that actually kept me up at night wasn't what was happening between me and Renata. It was my son. It was the fact that he had been in that house, absorbing things he didn't have language for, being asked to keep something from his father, feeling relieved when he finally told me, relieved like he'd been holding something heavy for a 6-year-old. That was the part I kept coming back to. Not in anger at Renata, just in a quiet, persistent sadness that a child had been made to carry the weight of adult decisions he had nothing to do with. Renata and I talked seriously, really talked, about 3 weeks after that night on the couch. Not a fight. Not a breakdown. Just 2 people sitting at a table trying to figure out what was true and what came next. She said she was sorry. I believed her. Believing someone is sorry and knowing what to do with that are 2 different things, though, and I told her that. I told her I didn't hate her. That was true also. What I told her, and I meant it, was that I didn't know how to unknow what I knew. Not because I was punishing her, but because trust isn't a decision. You can decide to stay. You can decide to try. But you can't decide to trust someone. That either rebuilds itself slowly over time or it doesn't. And I was not willing to pretend it was already there when it wasn't. She said she understood. I don't know if she did, but she said it. We didn't make a dramatic decision that night. There was no final declaration, no signing of papers, no moment where one of us walked out with a bag. Life is slower and messier than that. What happened was gradual, a slow uncoupling that neither of us rushed and neither of us stopped. I moved into the guest room properly. We kept things stable for Caleb. We were civil. Sometimes we were even warm with each other, in the way that people who have known each other for a long time can be warm even when everything else has changed. About 2 months later, I found an apartment 15 minutes away. Caleb friendly, second bedroom, small backyard with a patch of grass he could run around in. The day I moved my things out, Caleb helped me carry boxes. He didn't fully understand what was happening. We'd explained it in the way you explain things to 6-year-olds, carefully and simply. That Dad was going to have his own house and he'd be going back and forth. That both of us loved him, and that part wasn't changing. He seemed okay. Kids are resilient in ways that simultaneously amaze you and break your heart. When we finished unloading the last box, he looked around the new apartment and said, "Can I have the second bedroom?" I told him yes. He went and stood in it for a moment with his hands on his hips, doing that thing kids do where they're sizing up a space for potential. Then he came back out and asked if we could get a dog now. I laughed. First real laugh in a while. I told him we'd talk about it. I've been in the apartment for 4 months now. Caleb comes on weekends and 2 evenings a week. We have a routine: homework, dinner, bad TV, throwing a ball in the backyard after school. Normal things. Good things. Renata and I are still technically married on paper. That process is moving at the pace those things move. We're civil. We're decent to each other for Caleb's sake, and I think genuinely decent to each other beyond that too. Whatever she did, and I've had a lot of time to sit with it, I don't carry it as hatred. I carry it as a lesson about the difference between a relationship that's functioning and one that's actually okay. Those are not the same thing. I spent 9 years not fully knowing that. I know it now. The man, I never met him. Never looked him up. Never asked her more than I needed to know. That was a deliberate choice. Some information doesn't add anything except pain, and I had enough to process without adding a face to it. That was the right call for me. I don't know if it'd be the right call for everyone. Here's the only thing I'd say to anyone sitting with something similar right now. And I'm not saying it as advice, just as something I learned the slow way. The silence you keep to avoid disruption is not the same as peace. I kept a lot of silence. I told myself it was maturity, or patience, or not wanting to cause problems. Some of it was just fear dressed up as stability. The disruption came anyway. It always does. If you made it to the end of this story, thank you for listening. I don't share things like this easily. Drop a comment below, whatever's on your mind. If something in this felt familiar, say it. If you've been through something similar and came out the other side, I'd genuinely like to hear that. Subscribe if you're new here. There are more stories coming.